Hello and welcome to CSS Basic Video Series. In this course, we will be cover CSS in just 9 videos, the very basic parts of CSS. Like we'll be starting how we can use CSS, the backgrounds, margins, paddings, divs, floats, display, positioning, and a lot of things we'll try to cover in CSS, right? So let's get started. What CSS is right now? CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. We'll be covering in this video what CSS is and how to use CSS and the basic syntax of CSS, right? So what is we just learned about HTML in our previous section. We just learned about HTML. HTML is kind of hypertext markup language, which is the contents in web pages, the basic skeleton, the basic structure of web page. We use HTML. So in CSS we use how the contents should be displayed, how the contents should be managed. So if you just do some practical work, so you will understand the basic idea. Okay, so what you really need to work on CSS, you need a text editor. In our case, we can use Sublime, and you have option for using Atom text editor or brackets or WebStorm, but we'll try to use Sublime, which is quite simple. So we use Sublime and a browser, which is Google Chrome, or you can go with Firefox. Both are great. Okay. Now if you just Sublime is already installed with us, so if I just go to my desktop and then right click and create a new folder, so our CSS part, CSS, and if I just click and drag my folder to my Sublime text editor, or if you're using any text editor, you can just go ahead and open the files in your text editor. Now for example, if I just create a new file called index.html, and then let me just write some basic HTML, and this time we're learning CSS. And here let me just write h1, say hello world, and then if I just go back and let me just refresh this, there it is, we just got the hello world. Okay, so how CSS works, let me just give you the basic syntax, the basic idea of CSS. We can just use let me first tell you how many ways we can just use CSS. There are 3 ways we can use CSS. The first way is we can use it internally, right? Or we can say internal CSS, and then we can say external CSS, which is external file for CSS that we will be cover, and then we have some inline CSS, right? So external is the best way, and if you want to use some kind of inline CSS, you can just use internal CSS right in the head section, but inline CSS means when you use some CSS just like that. So let's get started with inline CSS. So what is inline CSS? Let's say for example, if I just go to my style and then I can say color colons red. So we just select h1 and then we just change the color of h1 into red, and then we put semicolon at the end. If you just go back and refresh, there it is, we just got. And we can even add a lot of CSS properties that we'll be covering in this series. If you just make it blue, there it is, we just got some changes color, right? Okay, this is called the inline CSS that we learned. What if we just cut them right here from here, the CSS part only, and if we just get rid of the attributes and value, and if I just, now we are covering internal CSS. If I just write a file right like here and paste some kind of h1, this is our element, and then if I just paste them a little bit, break them, save it, refresh, or if I just change the color to, for example, black, and the background would be black and the text would be, for example, white. Save, refresh, there it is. Let me just zoom it a little bit and talk about the syntax of CSS. Okay, this is our whole code, and this is right here our selector, which is we are just selecting h1, which is inside our index file right here. This is our h1, we are just selecting h1, and then we are just applying some brackets. We just add some brackets, and then we need to add a property. This is called a property. We are just adding, how many properties we are adding right now? 2 properties, the color property and then the background color property, right? And with property we just put some kind of colons and then the value, right? Every property has a specific their own specific values, and then we put finally semicolon. So this is our properties area, and we just need to first we need to select the tag, which is h1 or p tag or div, anything, and then we just need to sort all the code inside the bracket, and then we need to add some properties for that. So this is the introduction to CSS, and in our next video covering a lot of things like colors and backgrounds. So I will see you in the next video.